before we get deep into what the actual ordinance is, I think there's a lot of confusion regarding a lot of these terms regarding caste, jati, varna. So I think maybe before we get into that, can you give us a little bit of what do these terms actually mean, and what is the confusion a lot of times that people misuse the terms?
Well, that's a great question to start off with, and one that actually remains to be answered. There's actually no agreed upon definition of what caste is. Caste is a word that's rooted in the Portuguese word casta, and it became kind of a catch-all term that was used by Europeans to try to understand the complexity that they were met with in their first interactions with Indian society. Now, of course, Indian society has its own indigenous social groupings and ways of identifying, but caste became this catch all where it conflated a variety of ways in which people identified by religion, by clan, by traditional occupation, by clan. These were groups that might have had shared oral histories, shared traditions, and just like any sort of identity, it wasn't something that was singular in the sense that one person or one group has only one identity. People and human societies have always been complex, whether it's India or any other civilization. Today, academic scholars still don't agree on what caste is. However, there is a predominant stereotype of what caste is, and that is a simplistic pyramid that has 4 to 5 classes with priests on the top, in which Indian society is reduced to a hierarchy in which the priests kind of lord over the rest of society. Indian society has never been organized in this manner, nor is it today. Yet, this is probably one of the most entrenched stereotypes about Indian society. Now, caste is a reality in the sense that it is today what's called a legal fiction or an administrative category under Indian law. What that means is that there are certain groups that originally these groups were identified through census exercises starting all the way back in the late 1800s that continued through the 1930s under British administration, where different communities were categorized and put into what are called schedules. Now, some of these schedules, I outlined classes that were identified as being depressed classes. Those might have been economically or socially disadvantaged. And so today, there are essentially 4 categories. There are scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward classes. And if you are not designated in any one of those 3, other backward classes is actually a little bit more of a recent or a newer category in the sense that it came about in the 1980s, I believe. However, if you don't have a legal administrative designation of scheduled caste, other backward class, or scheduled tribe, then you are default general category. The thing about these administrative categories, however, is that there's no checklist. There wasn't one in the late 1800s or the mid 1930s where you had to meet a certain number of checkmark boxes that would then say, okay, this is why it's justified to put you here. And so that's why even today, the category is kind of complicated because you've essentially put a wide variety of different communities under one category, but those communities may not share much in common with one another. So that is kind of what caste is. Now, you asked me also about Jati and Varna. So, Jati is probably one of the primary social markers or social groupings that were found in India that is an indigenous category. But this idea, even about Jati is probably the closest thing that comes to some of the definitions that we see about caste being endogamous, meaning groups that only marry within each other that are based on trade. However, not all jatis are trade based. And even when a jati is, say, trade or occupation based, not everyone within that jati engages in that particular trade, certainly not today. It may have back in medieval times or even later, like it has in any other society where trades were passed down from father to son in most traditional patriarchal societies. And then lastly, Varna is a concept of basically archetypes or psychological personalities, where you find descriptions of 4 different types of people. And these are based on your natural tendencies and your skills, so that some have a greater aptitude towards educating or studying the scriptures or religious life. Some might have more propensity for governance or rulemaking. Others might have more propensity towards trade. And lastly, others might have a greater skill set towards service or working with their hands. All of these are 4 personality types that some of the sacred texts within Hinduism say form the basis of a well-functioning society, where you look at what is the best way in which you can serve a greater good with your skill set, with your inclinations, and then work in society on that basis.
Wow, that was an amazing answer. Honestly, I think that gives a very different perspective than what is sort of the mainstream, I guess, commentary on what is caste, jati, varna. So I think
Mhm.
these are almost completely different in many ways. I think from an Indian perspective, jati and varna is what sort of that is more indigenous, and that caste is more of like a super imposition based on what you're saying. If
Exactly.
I'm correct.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the other thing is that, you know, starting from 6th grade, caste is something that is equated with Hinduism. But even if we were to say that jati is caste, and there's scholarship out there that says that jati cannot exactly fit what caste is supposed to be, because the conception of caste presupposes a pan-Indian social reality that's the same whether you're in Gujarat, whether you're in Andhra Pradesh or
Nice.
somewhere like Odisha or wherever else. And that's not how Indian society and all these regional differences are. But it's across all religious traditions. Different social identities are across different religious traditions, so that you might have certain trade based communities
Right.
that are Muslim, but then some are Hindu, some might be Jain, some might be Buddhist. So, again, this kind of entrenched stereotype of a pyramid that is equated with Hinduism is, as I've said, one of the most entrenched stereotypes that plagues a better understanding, a more accurate understanding of Hinduism.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.